UK and US. Both of them are reporting that there are concerns about the rate of vaccination in minority communities. You follow? So it stands to reason that a reasonable assumption could be made that a number of our returning nationals who are coming back may, right, not be vaccinated. And last question, what did we know? We know that these individuals, the Christmas season, all of our festivities, the visits from loved ones, right, all of that was the vaccine, the spike back in December. You follow? But you fought. You fought. Okay. You know, they are before you. You are aware. Okay.
Mr. Feeney?
Who's Miss Williams? No, I got the fact. No, I was able to confirm that GDTV is here, so that's why. So as soon as they have the link ready,
yes.
Tell the Pablo team go on to tell them go on to Facebook, GDTV on Facebook. Or remove the mask.
Just hold on.
Okay. Why are you looking like you, huh?
Ready, remove it completely. Just remove it completely.
That's for St. Lucia Times. Shall feel that man competing with you, huh? Yeah. Is you ready?
So all of the various channels. Can we forward to all of the channels? Giving hands and so on.
Well, special good morning to members of the press that are here today. Thank you all for joining us. We are going to commence now our press conference. Please allow me to introduce the head table. First, we have Honorable Bradley Felix, MP for Choiseul Saltibus. In the middle, the lone lady with us today, the lady who did an exceptional job down in the Dennery North constituency, doing a stellar job for the United Workers' Party in the Senate, Senator Ferropolius. And then we have from the constituency of Soufrière, Senator Herod Stanislas, who's representing us here today. So we're here today to basically call for the government to implement more stringent measures so that we can act decisively, swiftly, and effectively to wipe out this cancer of COVID-19, which continues to afflict all sections of our society. Everyone in St. Lucia today knows someone who is infected with COVID. In fact, I just got off the phone with someone who I've had the pleasure to represent, and to hear the agony in her voice about the traumatic experience that she and her family are going through due to the fact that the entire family have been infected with COVID-19. This is becoming a very serious situation and has been at crisis proportions for quite some time. Now, I have three speakers to come after me. My contribution will be around the foundation that the United Workers' Party has left for this administration to go in and to deal with the issues of COVID-19. When COVID-19 came to St. Lucia, not many countries in the world knew about how to fight the pandemic, how to mount it, how the virus would mutate, and all the various concerns the world had about COVID-19. They were all unknowns. The world was largely experimenting and more or less building the management systems as they went along to make sure that they and their respective countries can win the battle against COVID-19. Well, it's not so with this government, because when the St. Lucia Labour Party administration assumed office, the world already had a year and a half of COVID. They had so much practice. They were able to be spectators for a year and a half, for the most part of 18 months, to be able to see what was necessary to get the virus going. In that time, what did we do? We left a solid foundation, which they have since squandered. We have implemented the opening of the respiratory hospital at Victoria. I think 140 beds are there now. We established over 500 quarantine rooms so that people who are coming in from COVID hotspots, both returning nationals and tourists, that risk would have been averted. We set up protocols that were very decisive and stringent. We didn't think of what was the political thing to do. We ensure that we protect the people of St. Lucia first. Back then, it was more unclear what the science was. Philip J. Peer had a whole year and a half to see what the science is. And to hear that he's still waiting on the science is of grave concern to us. We were able to get the Cuban Medical Brigade to come into St. Lucia. Over 120 members, nurses, doctors, and other respiratory experts to be able to come and help us to fight the crisis. We had to open up the Owen King EU Hospital to make sure that our health system had built capacity. Later in the pandemic, we had to beef up the testing capacity at the Ezra Long lab at Owen King EU. And then as well, when that proved to be a little incapable, we also had to mobilize the resources of the forensic lab so that people can have alternatives, and so that the testing capacity of the country would have been up to par to ensure that we were able to fight COVID-19. In addition to that, we also realized that COVID-19 brought with it significant economic destruction. Significant economic destruction. Treasuries across the world were completely wiped out because governments were shut down for months. And that meant that as you shut down business activity, that the economy had a debilitating negative effect. And so what we had to do was to set up a very robust economic recovery plan. That included, for example, income support to some 12,000 people who are registered with NIC, and a further 6,000 individuals who are unregistered, small business persons, hairdressers, barbershops, rum shops, bars, small restaurants, vendors. All of them amounted to about 6,000 that benefited from the income support program that we established, so that we can meet the objective a little closer of fighting not just livelihoods, but ensuring that lives were protected as well. We had protocols that this government is still using to reopen the borders. And while they were saying close the borders, and while we were saying that if we close the borders, there are too many people that would have been affected, the Labour Party didn't want to hear that. They did anything to win the election. They duped the people of St. Lucia. They misled them on a range of issues. They planned misleading voice notes to say and spread a lot of misinformation about COVID-19 and what was happening. Now today we are hearing that the same problems, or even worse problems, they are now encountering. It is my understanding that a very, very noteworthy organization in the medical fraternity has written to the government in the last 2 days to ask them to consider even greater measures. And a lot of those measures are geared at ensuring that we curb this spread that is currently affecting hundreds of our citizens. And so one of the measures I was told that was recommended to the government was to shut the country down. We could see that the government has had a certain reluctance to be able to do so, and we can understand why, because the Labour Party is not concerned with health science or economic science. They're concerned mostly with political science. And that is the sad thing about this pandemic. We're asking Philip J. Pierre and the St. Lucia Labour Party to lead the country. The country needs leadership at this time. The country does not need any more politics. We need leadership. Too many people are at risk. Too many people are dying. Too many people are getting sick. Too many people are missing work. Too many people are now finding it more difficult to take care of their families. We're begging you, please do something drastic. Stop all of this cosmetic approach that you are now doing to try and change the names of institutions and to expunge records and to come up with all of these games, go into the house, and the biggest consideration for the government is to free up marijuana while we're in a COVID crisis. I mean, come on. Let's behave like we are in a crisis. 2,300 cases. You know, I observed in Grenada, and I hope that we would never have to even consider that. But in Grenada, I went to actually research it, because when I heard that it was suggested that they had considered an ethics committee, and the Minister of Health was very clear. He said that he hopes that Grenada would not have to ever use it. And so that ethics committee was set up in the event that Grenada ran out of ICU beds, and they had to choose who to die and who not to die. This is how serious this thing is. But I say so to underscore the point that a small country, one of our neighbors, understand the severity of this crisis, and they understand the destructive nature of COVID-19. While we are here playing games at press conferences telling people that we are waiting on the science. The science is clear, Mr. Prime Minister. It is very clear. Act now, act swiftly, act decisively. Now, I want to now allow some space for some of my colleagues who are here. We have a very honorable and capable head table that is going to address you today. So I want to ask the Honorable Bradley Felix, the MP for Choiseul Saltibus, to come to the podium and to deliver some brief opening remarks. We will all be here to take your questions following presentations by each member. So first, or as they would say in the La Fac, you're opening the batting. Thank you.
What is that? Is that showing? Good morning, gentlemen. I don't see any ladies from the press. Gentlemen from the press, good morning, and good morning, St. Lucia. As an organization, the United Workers' Party represents a significant section of the population. And it is a section that has been reaching out to us, seeking advice, seeking help regarding, and also very, very concerned regarding the current state of COVID in the country. I want to make it very, very clear that I recognize not just UWP supporters, but SLP supporters also very concerned with the state of the COVID in the country. Whether you red, whether you blue, whether you green, whether you yellow, every single person in St. Lucia is currently concerned. And I dare say, and I will say anybody who is gloating over the current spike or the situation that we are in currently as far as deaths and increase in rates, their head should be checked. This is not a political issue. This is a matter of the health and the lives of St. Lucians. By the own admission of the Minister of Health, he indicated that the Delta variant has a greater transmission rate, it is deadlier, and it poses significant concerns for the country. And by that very admission, it should mean that the government should maybe go back into history, into their own recommendations that they were making to the government when we had figures nowhere near what we are experiencing today. We have seen and heard from the various Caribbean leaders some tougher measures being taken. We have heard from the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, just next to us, very close to the community of Choiseul, Saltibus, St. Vincent, that the MU variant could be on their shores. We have heard it is in Jamaica, could be in Barbados, and that really truly means that our shores will soon be, greeted with that virus. We have heard some extreme statements, as my colleague said, from Grenada. We have also heard the Prime Minister of St. Vincent speak about obtaining more body bags, obtaining containers for refrigerated purposes, because this thing is extremely, extremely serious, and we need more decisive action. We need our people to see that as a government, stronger measures are being taken. We need to be aware that we have coming up Journée Creole. We have the Christmas season upon us in 3 months. We know how our people are very sociable people. We know what's going to happen around that time. We remember last year, the Christmas season, when St. Lucians came from overseas, when we thought they would have been in home quarantine, they were liming all over the place. We need to ask the current government, what are their plans thinking forward as it relates to the Christmas season, the Journée Creole season? We recognize that there will be visitors coming from, and family coming from hotspots. Some may be vaccinated, some may not be vaccinated. How are we going to deal with that? We also know there will be people coming for the Christmas season and also Journée Creole via the back door. How are we going to deal with that? We recognize the strain on our frontline workers. We heard the Prime Minister speak to the number of police officers in quarantine. I have a personal issue with whether this was a statement he should have made at this point in time, considering he was indicating to the entire country the shortfalls of our security forces. We hear the strain, the firemen, the nurses, all of the people in the hospitals and the healthcare facilities, they are tired. We believe there should be a period where people can reinvigorate, rejuvenate, a period of sanitization, a period of reflection. The government needs to take that kind of action. It is extremely important that happens. As a party, we think we are obliged to come and speak and indicate to the government that they need to take more decisive action. We cannot continue to use moral suasion because we know our people. Most of our people will want to follow the protocols, but there is a sector. And again, we heard from the Minister of Health when he was advising us in Parliament some time ago, that while the bars are being closed earlier or the curfews are earlier, people are moving the parties to the morning. You close on Sundays, people are moving their activities to the Saturday. People are changing the way to try to beat the system. We have to take stronger measures because this virus and the transmission rate, while you tell people about social distancing, and they think the social distancing is when I stand on a line in a supermarket or I stand on a line in a bank. Social distance means that we need to curb social gatherings. That message needs to go out. This is serious, serious business. And I know it will be a difficult decision for the government to even think of shutting the country down, because we know how revenue is impacted. But if something more decisive is not done by the government, something will happen which will force the government to act in a different direction. The essential services that are currently open, don't you think eventually they will be inundated with cases themselves? I went to a bank this morning and there's no activity, only coming in to collect your card. There's no teller services. This is what it's coming to, and it's going to spread from business house to business house. Our productivity in this country is going to come to an all-time low. It's going to affect every single sector and every single person in this country. And we need to take very, very serious note of where we are going. So I urge the government, I urge the Prime Minister, we cannot go back and change the beginning, but we can start now and change the ending, because that ending could be extremely disastrous if we do not act now. I thank you very much.
Thank you, MP for Choiseul, Honorable Bradley Felix. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to call on Senator Ferropolius to address you.
Good morning, members of the press, and a special good morning to you, St. Lucians. Fellow St. Lucians, the sharp rise in the number of COVID-19 cases over the last few weeks, the total number of positive cases in home quarantine, the number of bus drivers who have been infected, the number of positively tested patients who have died, either while in care at the Victoria Hospital or in home quarantine, suggests that we are in a much dire situation now than before. And desperate situations require more stringent measures. The sharp rise in cases also suggests that COVID-19 was not a prank last year. It has never been, and today is still not a hoax, contrary to what many of you were made to believe by a desperate and power-hungry St. Lucia Labour Party. In fact, due to its seriousness and foreseeable disastrous impact on human life and the economy, the former Allen-led administration enacted legislation and put various measures in place to avert and to minimize community spread and to contain the virus on a whole. But what did the Labour Party and its operatives do? Instead of lending their support by their actions and encouraging the very same among their supporters, they incited division, chaos, disharmony, disunity in this country. The Labour Party strongly criticized the policies and measures implemented by the former administration. And these measures were meant to cushion the catastrophic health and economic impacts of the virus. The St. Lucia Labour Party went further to make the people of this country believe that COVID-19 was not as severe as the former government portrayed it to be, and that the protocols were infringing on the rights of the people of this country. Ernest Hilaire condemned the former administration for suspending liquor licenses. Are those small business owners now no longer required to take care of their families or pay bills, Mr. Hilaire? Is closing the bars and restaurants, and even more so, the extended curfew hours, no longer an action of a wicked, uncaring, and heartless government? If this is not an illustration of hypocrisy, then tell me what it is now. Mr. Hilaire, I guess you have satisfied the needs of the guys on the block so that they can no longer complain to their boss man about having nothing to do during the extended curfew hours. Did you not ensure that they now have Netflix and television sets to entertain themselves in preparation for the extended hours they would need to spend inside from Saturday evening until Monday morning? Did you not? And what about the entire day of curfew on a Sunday, making it impossible for persons to attend the church service and to worship? You also complained about it, Mr. Hilaire, that you wanted to spend time with your family, your mother, and you were denied that opportunity. Sunday. What has changed, therefore? Is it the science? Has there been some kind of intervention that has now forced the St. Lucia Labour Party to mysteriously begin to see things differently now that the ship has a different captain? Well, Captain, the ship is not only sinking, but it's about to wreck. And we need you to save all St. Lucians who are left on board. Keep it buoyant amidst this turbulence, for you claim to have had all the solutions to better manage this pandemic. Today we see a lapse of enforcement of protocols at a time when the situation is at its worst, when the virus is wreaking havoc in this country. How many more must die, Mr. Prime Minister? Must one member of Parliament succumb to COVID-19, God forbid, before you make the tough decisions? Clearly, this government has not been doing a good job at managing the pandemic. This is the worst that we have seen, and we need more stringent measures now. The United Workers' Party calls upon the captain of the ship, the Prime Minister, to bite the bullet and apologize to the people of St. Lucia for misleading them, either through their politically charged pronouncements, irresponsible behavior, or otherwise. The St. Lucia Labour Party needs to admit to St. Lucians, the people of Fair Helen, that while in opposition, they made some miscalculations. It's only human to err. Miscalculations that are pertinent to the pandemic. And that what they are observing now is indeed a lot more serious than they previously imagined. please, Mr. Prime Minister, do the conscionable thing. Restore your credibility. Prove your better leadership. Please take St. Lucians out of this wilderness of confusion and bewilderment. Instead of busy trying to please your friends and staying in your comfort zone being interrogated by your own press secretary, come out of hibernation and do what you did while in opposition. Find the time to regularly address the nation like the former Prime Minister did, to reassure and comfort the frantic nation, particularly the 2,500 plus people of this nation who have actually contracted the virus. Put measures in place to ensure that persons who are home quarantined are more rigorously monitored, for we are now convinced that most cases are spread via family members due to the relaxation of protocols in the home and community. Mr. Prime Minister, this is your time. This is your time to prove to St. Lucians that you are better at weathering the storm. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Polius, for such a thought-provoking presentation here this morning. All of which you have said I have totally agreed with. We want to, at this time, recognize all of our Facebook viewers, and for those of you watching us live on GDTV, we want to say a special good morning to all of you in the various constituencies across the country. Now, it gives me great pleasure to invite to the podium a young man who has changed the landscape of his constituency while he represented the wonderful constituency of Soufrière for the last 5 years. Please help me welcome Senator Herod Stanislas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And let me, on behalf of the United Workers' Party, extend our sincere condolences to the families, friends, and all St. Lucians who have lost a loved one due to COVID-19. Our thoughts and prayers are with you, and we wish you all God's richest blessings. Members of the press here today, St. Lucians at home and abroad who are viewing us live on social media, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to each and every one of you. A critical pillar of the philosophy of the United Workers' Party is that we embrace the view that good health is an extremely valuable savings account for a nation, stemming from the wisdom of the ages that the health of a nation, our prosperity, is the wealth of a nation. It is from that perspective that the United Workers' Party remains extremely concerned about the spiraling high levels of COVID cases on island and the obvious absence of a clear and solid plan to meaningfully address the current health crisis. We can see clearly now that it is always easy to speechify and make groundless promises when in opposition, claiming to have all the solutions. But now that the St. Lucia Labour Party regime has the reins of government, we see the fever, the chills, the cough, the headache, and the nausea that this government has in managing the pandemic. In the last 2 months, over 40 St. Lucians have died from COVID-19, and thousands have contracted the deadly virus. In this period of unprecedented deaths is not a time to play games with people's lives, but a time for bold and decisive leadership. Hence, we ask, where are all the answers that the SLP had some months ago? Has it completely vanished? The SLP vehemently criticized the state of emergency, saying that it was unnecessary and that subsidiary legislation can achieve the same effect. They are in power now. What has changed since then? Absolutely nothing. The science that we are supposed to trust is the process that ought to improve our understanding, but what we see is confusion and inaction on the part of this government. Ladies and gentlemen, the current COVID situation is alarmingly sad and intensifying and can be highlighted in this critical manner. 1. The Delta variant, that is far more transmissible and deadly, is now confirmed in country. This is happening while we await confirmation from the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CAFA, about the MU variant already confirmed in next door St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and also Jamaica. 2. Our community respiratory centers, where the testing is done, are all overwhelmed as nurses, doctors, and community health aides all buckle on the mounting levels of stress. 3. Many frontline workers are suffering, with over 150 police officers affected by the coronavirus. Our hearts and love go out to our medical and other frontline personnel who are seriously impacted under the pressures of the coronavirus with the inability of the government to manage this health crisis. 4. Most, if not all, St. Lucians have realized that the current management of the pandemic has collapsed. 5. We are indeed in a sad state of affairs, mindful that hundreds of potential and eventual individuals who are tested positive utilize public transportation to and from various testing centers, exposing large sections of the population to the wrath of the pandemic. And while the government remains quiet about this and other issues, alarming numbers of drivers have unfortunately lost their lives. The UWP believes that now is not a time for the government to rehash its campaign rhetoric, but to hit the ground running to effectively and meaningfully address the destructive impact of COVID-19. It is neither the time to undertake cosmetic name changes to the institutions that manage COVID-19, but instead to give clear leadership and solution-driven approaches to fight this pandemic with urgency, to reduce the high levels of spread with more rapid effectiveness. We are running out of time because while the government remains confused about the science, the U.S. State Department and Center for Disease Control, the CDC, are very clear about the science. They have already relegated St. Lucia with respective level 4 ratings. Simply put it, they have said don't travel to St. Lucia. Sadly, it is only now the government is talking about balancing lives and livelihoods. The hypocrisy is just unbelievable. In the interest, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of preserving more lives and livelihoods, we must clean up the current mess now. We urge the government to move with urgency to save lives. We believe on focusing on solutions that fuels progress in overcoming the pandemic in a manner that puts St. Lucian lives before the politics. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my colleague, Senator Herod Stanislas. Raised some very important points. In fact, we're receiving reports from the tourism community that although not yet major, but they're already starting to see cancellations where people are nervous about not necessarily the COVID restriction, the COVID situation, but the COVID restriction is casting a shadow over their confidence because they have recognized that countries without notice may have to shut down and they could be stuck within a quarantine situation if the country needs to close down. So the government needs to act very quickly. There are some 8,000 jobs that have come back in the tourism industry. And what we want to do is to make sure that we're able to sustain all of those jobs. So if we are not able to deal with this situation in a very decisive manner, then we believe that the repercussions are going to be even more dire. So it is absolutely critical that we must act and act swiftly. We open up the floor now for members of the media to ask whatever questions you want. The panel is here, myself, and we are willing to answer any questions that you may have. Okay. All right, I saw you and then you yield to him, no problem.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
As of August 30th, St. Lucia has moved from the CDC level 3 COVID-19 high list to level 4. How does the opposition, UWP opposition, perceive this as affecting the future of tourism in the country?
Well, it's an absolutely bad news for tourism, and that's why we're saying that while the science is unclear to the Labour Party, it is certainly clear to those major institutions. Like I said a while ago, we're already starting to see cancellations within the hotel community. And so therefore, where there are cancellations and low occupancies, you're going to have people that will not have jobs. Every single tourist that comes through the airport pays $100 in departure taxes and pays an average of about $200 on VAT on the vacation sale, in addition to VAT and other taxes they pay on their consumption. So they would contribute to the government coffers about $400 per stay. And that is a significant amount of monies when you multiply it. We are now in the fall period, where traditionally the numbers tend to subside a little bit. But what is important are the bookings that are there for the winter. Are those bookings going to hold? And we have to make sure that we act now so that we can give the international community, the airlines, the tour operators, and the customers themselves the level of confidence that we need. We must consider that people have options. And, you know, if I am concerned about contracting COVID in St. Lucia, why should I come when I can go to another jurisdiction? Especially if I have booked with one of the leading chains that sell to St. Lucia. I can easily transfer my trip to another destination. Airlines are very flexible these days with refunds and change fees. And we must also be cognizant of that reality in making sure that we secure the jobs most of all. There are 8,000 jobs that have come back since the reopening of our borders in 2020. And we did so because we understand that 14,000 people being at home in the tourism industry would have made the COVID situation even worse for us to deal with. We have another question?
I guess, good morning, so you would have had the benefit of dealing with the COVID situation first.
Yes.
Being the immediate administration. And I guess it's no surprise that managing the pandemic is costly. I think we heard the CMO some days ago suggesting that the price tag is ridiculous. No words out. So as far as the international agencies who, went ahead and rapidly allocated money to islands like ours to deal with this. I think we've come to understand that in the region of $500 million was sort of borrowed. We know some of it was used to pay bills, etc. So what I'm asking is, does this current administration have enough of that left over, use your imagination, to manage the pandemic? Or is it a case where there is just no fiscal space to get any more money to execute some of the plans that you're proposing?
So, which is why we're saying that deal with the problem before it becomes a crisis. And the government they've wasted 6 weeks in trying to politicize this issue, and they've made the issue worse for themselves, both from the health cost point of view and both from a fiscal point of view. Because the $500 million that you spoke of, if you think about the fact that salaries alone is over $500 million, the estimates would reveal it's about $561 million to pay salaries. A lot of the monies that the Labour Party spoke of were monies that were lent to countries around the world for budgetary support to help keep their governments afloat, to pay salaries, to look at the extra cost of COVID. COVID would have cost us, in our tenure, about $38 million that was spent getting Victoria Hospital opened up, getting testing capacity. PCR tests are very, very expensive. I mean, the retail price is very expensive. And then quarantine fees to quarantine individuals. Note that the state was doing that for free, the contact tracing, the Cuban Medical Brigade, transportation, flying, expert in and out, testing equipment, and a whole host of challenges. So the healthcare cost went up, and if you look at the estimates of the Social Economic Review, you will see that it went up, which is why we're saying deal with this problem now, because it is going to be a problem that will get out of control, and we will not be able to deal with it if we allow it to go even higher than it is now. Already, I think it's reached an alarming rate, and that in itself is absolutely critical. But I'm glad that you mentioned fiscal space, because the St. Lucia Labour Party failed to understand that when you talk about the COVID management science, you're talking about health science, but you're also talking about economic science. So you needed to have as much economic activity as possible to be able to get that revenue that you're speaking of, to create or to make a healthier fiscal situation so that you can deal with the problem. Now, some of the extreme positions that they were taking about close the borders, that the tourists were bringing the virus, and now they have gone and backpedaled. In fact, I would say they have flip-flopped around, and they have not been consistent on any of the issues as it pertains to COVID. They have just been like a roller coaster on the issues. 1 minute they're up, 1 minute they're down. And that is a scary proposition. One thing you can see about this government, in opposition, while we were in government, we said we needed the tourism industry to be able to pay the bills for COVID and to be able to run the country. Now that we are in government, we're saying the same thing. We're not calling to close the borders unless you see that there is an alarming rate of transmission of the virus from tourists to locals. Then you have to rethink that and do something totally different. But what we're seeing based on the empirical evidence available to us is that St. Lucia needs to protect its tourism industry, because if you don't get the monies coming in from those activities, you're going to have a more difficult situation. And as well, countries around the world now don't have the luxury of getting additional income support. I have not seen any pronouncements from the IMF or the World Bank to suggest that there's a new package that's coming soon for COVID, because we've now reached that cycle. So the government must clean this up, because we're practically now on our own and we have to deal with the situation.
One other, still to do with the COVID, we know all the leading health agencies recommend vaccination as the best form of defense to contain the COVID spread. And it's no secret that in St. Lucia, the vaccine hesitancy rate is pretty much like one of the highest in the region. So 37 odd thousand supports the United Workers Party, voted for the United Workers Party last election. And vaccine hesitancy, I think it transcends the political divide. So if you had an opportunity to speak to the hesitant, curious, skeptical supporters, UWP supporters, what would your message be to them?
In government, we have said, go get vaccinated. We're saying the same thing as we're in opposition. We're encouraging everyone to get vaccinated because that is going to be one of the panaceas, if you will, that will allow us to be able to win the war against COVID and to better enable us to coexist with COVID. We have to absolutely. I mean, I think we're about 15 or 16% now, and that means that you have a vaccination gap of 55% to get to herd immunity. We need to be at 70%. So we are way miles away from herd immunity. And again, this is why the government must act now. Be decisive. They've been talking about having incentives and having a vaccination campaign. They've been talking about it for 6 weeks now. COVID is not waiting for a new government to settle down. COVID is moving at supersonic speed. And what you have to do is to make sure that you move as fast as the virus. We don't get the sense of urgency from this administration that this virus is a crisis or it's a priority for them. And this is worrisome. They need to move now. And that is what we're saying.
Sticking on the vaccine hesitancy subject, I'm not to answer it.
Mandate?
No. Well, not yet, but we can deal with that if you want. If the Prime Minister would call your political leader or any one of you to say, well, hey, let's get together and have some bipartisan vaccination drive with the UWP.
We're available. Of course, we want to get involved. Absolutely. And which is why we are disappointed that while we were in government and we invited the opposition to join us on a range of issues, whether to come to the NEMAC meetings, whether to come to very important meetings when it comes to the strategic reopening of the economy. And we are saddened by the amount of those meetings that they boycotted. Because what we need now is a bipartisan show on this issue of COVID-19, because our country is going through one of its darkest hours. This is the greatest health crisis that we've seen in the history of our country. And I think that the politics must rise to that occasion to be able to win the fight for St. Lucia and St. Lucians. COVID is not looking at SLP and UWP or whether you wear a yellow or a red shirt. COVID is coming with a destructive force. And we absolutely must come together, hold hands where possible. And, you know, we want to get involved. And anything that we can do to help, to convince the people that we have influence over to do the right thing, follow the protocols, get vaccinated. Our voices have been large. I mean, if you check on the Facebook page of a lot of our former candidates and people in the leadership of the party, you will see a lot of those messages encouraging people to get vaccinated.
The last one for me, but sorry. It's not in relation to this COVID, so. Okay, yeah, so it's not of COVID if anyone free to take this one up. So there's correspondence that surfaced online supposedly from the former mayor, Mr. Francis, addressed to Party Chairman Pinkley Francis, expressing some concerns with the direction, composition of the executive. I think he's calling for a number of individuals on the executive to step down. Is that something that you are aware of and willing to address?
Honestly, I haven't seen the letter, Riani. What I would say to you, I would have a discussion with the chairman. I would make it a matter of priority, and I would love to give you a response or encourage the chairman to give you a reaction to that. I think it's important enough, an issue, but I haven't really seen the letter, and I wouldn't want to comment. I don't know if any of my colleagues have.
Well, okay, so we cannot, we just need the letter alone, but as far, I mean, every political party coming off of an election would have to go through some period of regrouping and reorganization, recalibration, if you will. Give us an update on the UWP's
What I can assure you is that process is very advanced, and you know, we are very thankful for this opportunity to be able to take a very critical look at ourselves and to see how we can make the UWP bigger, better, and stronger. What I can tell you is that there's still a lot of support for the United Workers' Party. Some 37,000 people voted for us, and we are encouraged by that. We get the messages, the letters, the phone calls every day. There are groups that have mobilized themselves. I want to shout out the Flabo Train group that I know that are listening to the press conference. And that's just an example of how there has been a grassroots mobilization, which makes it very easy for us to then put the structures in place from the top of the pendulum and make sure that we come back strong. But we're very encouraged in the immediate aftermath of the elections to see the level of outpouring and the support that has been sustained for the United Workers' Party. I think that our initial feedback is that perhaps our mechanics on election day would have been very detrimental in terms of how we managed and executed our campaigns on the day of election. That certainly is one of the things that would resonate with me, but I think there's clearly still a lot of support and a lot of goodwill for the United Workers' Party.
I would imagine a lot on the minds of a lot of your supporters and any political observer. The question would be, well, why? What is there any one situation, issue, or person or persons that may have contributed to the UWP's defeat?
No, we're doing a lot of focus groups at present, and the feedback that we're getting, and I'm being very premature to speak about this at a press conference and not having addressed the National Council or the hierarchy of the party. So I know that there's definitely a committee that has been set up to be able to look at those issues and to go around the country to see where did we go wrong and what do we need to do to fix it. And I can tell you that that work is very advanced. But until that report is concluded and put together, I wouldn't want to be premature and to let the cat out of the bag. But it's a fair question.
I just have two more, but before I come back to tourism, any other member on the head table,
Yes.
What are some key recommendations which the UWP will make to the new SLP regime in response to COVID-19 crisis management and rebuilding the economy post-COVID-19?
Anybody want to hear? Yeah.
You want to repeat the question?
Repeat the question.
All right. So while let's hear you again.
What are some key recommendations which the UWP would make to the new SLP regime in response to COVID-19 crisis management and rebuilding the economy post-COVID-19?
Certainly for me, and I know my colleagues will add to this, what we have always felt is ramp up the campaign very quickly so that more people can get vaccinated. We've seen in countries where there's a high level of vaccination rate, the level of hospitalization would come down, as well as the level of deaths would come down, and the rate of infection would come down. So vaccination clearly has been a big winner for a number of countries. My colleague spoke about quarantine. The quarantine capacity needs to be beefed up because too many people are quarantining at home, and that in itself would present some dire consequences because the home circumstances of a number of individuals they differ from family to family. Some families have one bathroom, some families have 3 bathrooms, and it goes up depending on your social stature. And so therefore, what we want to make sure is that you have people vaccinated. We need to find a way, and I heard the Minister of Health announce that there are 2 mobile vehicles that they're having. You need more than 2 mobile vehicles to go do mobile testing because you're talking about a lot of people. And when they're going to have to take the public transportation buses to go to and from the testing site, that poses another problem. We can see that bus drivers would have gotten the virus at work. Some have even died. And that in itself is of dire consequences to us. And then I think we've all shouted very loudly that the government must lead, be decisive, and don't be afraid to make very hard decisions so that we can ensure that we preserve the lives of the people of St. Lucia. So that would be it from me, and I want to make room for my colleague.
But just very quickly on your question, I strongly encourage the current government to stop the cycle of stopping projects. Because when you stop a project, you're costing the country. And that we have seen that seem to be a trend that is continuing. There are many people who were gainfully employed, and the people who were employed, contrary to what a lot of people may think, were not necessarily people who supported the Flabo party. On jobs around the island, you saw people on projects with the red bands, with the red kerchiefs and everything, and it was something that we believe, that showed that we were engaged in everybody in the various projects. So to stop a project is not going to help the economy at all. In fact, it will have some debilitating effects on the people's ability for continuous survival. So I think that's one of the things that I would recommend to the current government as it relates to keeping the economy growing and going. Thank you.
Any other questions from any other member of the media? Are we good? Yeah. All right, we want to thank you certainly. We want to thank all of you who are with us on GDTV. Thank you from various quarters. Thank you for your comments on Facebook. And we thank the Flabo Train Group for your support as well. We saw your comments as we are here in the conference room, and we want to certainly send greetings to you and your family and encourage you to stay safe. And thank you all for all of your support. This has been a successful press conference which we must bring to a close, and we thank you all for your tremendous support. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
PAX is the agent for Caribbean Line, which offers an effective alternative for global integrative of transport logistics from Sheerness, UK to Vieux-Fort St. Lucia in shipping, documentation, administrative procedure, loading and unloading operations. We also offer courier, small package service, customs brokerage, ship agency, freight forwarder, consolidator, and accounting services. Visit them today on New Dock Road, Vieux-Fort, or call 454-1200 or 719-8837. PAX is effective, efficient, and reliable.
Real estate transactions are now made easy. Whether buying, selling, or renting residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, or touristic property, we offer the best deals in real estate transactions with professional support, including valuation, material sourcing, and construction. Contact Ed Harris and Associates, your courteous and efficient real estate agents. Call 485-1456 or email caribbiz@gmail.com.
Do you need to copy or print your document? Are you in need of insurance? Are you looking for office stationery? Stop. Yes, LMP Services on Clark Lane, Vieux-Fort has all the services you need. They open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Or call 454-8757 or 8757 for affordable rates, reliable and effective customer service with a difference.
And Nestor's Auto Parts, located on the Labrie-Vifford Highway, is your place for auto parts. We have suspension parts, mounts, brakes, shocks, and so much more.
We specialize in accessories like mats, batteries, horns, lubricants, and much more.
We're open from Mondays to Saturdays from 8 to 5 and Sundays and most holidays from 8 to 1.
L'opri, Ernesto vai depois.
What do you need to transport? Call the hauler. At M&E's Trucking, we offer a wide range of services island-wide, from containerized movement, flatbed service, and lowboy transfers. We're located at Beanfield View Fort. Our skillful professional drivers are ready to serve you. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram or email us at vibration711@gmail.com. Call us at 488-1000. We're ready to serve you. M&E's Trucking Service, a powerhouse ready to haul.